Hello everyone, Xeno What If here. Bring in a re-upload of What If the Transformers Were in My Hero Academia Part 1. Link in the description of the fanfiction of this What If. Listen here you too. I do not own anything and this is not a scam. Chapter 1. Discovery. It was a hot and sunny day in Musudafu, a small city near Tokyo, Japan that also happened to be where the prestigious UA High School was located. At this prestigious school, young people from all over Japan, and even a few from outside of the country, enrolled there to become the next generation of heroes in a world where 80% of the population had superpowers. These powers, known as quirks, were considered to be the norm for many people, while the remaining 20% of people were born without quirks. These people unfortunately tended to be considered second-class citizens by most, seen as unfit in a world where superpowered beings were seen as superior. And it was here that a green-haired young man known as Izuku Midoriya was currently training, and at the moment, he felt like dying on the hot sands of Dagoba Beach. As it happened, he was one of these quirkless people. But all the same, he dreamed of one day becoming a hero, despite many telling him that he couldn't because of his lack of any power. However, that all changed one fateful day when he had met his all-time favorite hero, the symbol of peace, All Might. The meeting had initially gotten off to a rather rocky start, to say the least. But after an incident with a sludge villain and seeing potential in the teen after risking his life to save another, All Might had given Izuku the opportunity to inherit his own quirk, One for All. In order to do so, however, Izuku had to prepare his body for it first. And if he could do so in time, the heroic, if somewhat awkward, teen would be able to try and pass the UA entrance exam, allowing him to get into the school of his dreams and try to become a hero. And that is where we find Izuku now, training on Dagoba Beach to increase his strength in order to handle One for All. All Might had given him the task to clear away all of the junkheps that had littered the beach for years, which, as expected, proved to be quite the daunting task. It had been some months since his training started, and he was making good progress, but at the same time, it was still murder on his muscles. But I can't give up, Izuku thought as he forced himself onto his feet, clenching his teeth as tears began to fall from his eyes due to all of the exhaustion. I have to give it more than my all if I want to get into UA. He furrowed his brow in determination as he focused on the obstacle before him. He was trying to move a tall, metal storage unit that was in front of a large mound of scrap metal, and he had slipped on the sand when trying to push it the first time. He clenched his fists and thrust his arms toward the side of it again, opening his palms to push on it once more. Alright, Izuku, you can do this, I think. With all of the strength he could muster, the freckled, green-haired boy began pushing on the storage unit once more, making sure to keep his footing on the sand this time. Surprisingly, after about half a minute of not budging, the unit began to slide across the sand, with Izuku giving out a happy gasp at the sight. Yes, come on, just a little more. The more he pushed, the further the unit moved. But as it did, Izuku began to notice something very odd. The mountain of scrap was actually surrounding something, and it was quite a large object as well. From what he could see, it appeared to be a vehicle of some sort. However, the inheritor decided to focus on his current task of actually moving what was blocking the other large object before focusing on that one next. In 3 minutes' time, the storage unit was out of the way, and Izuku let out a heavy sigh as he wiped the sweat off his forehead. Glad that's out of the way. Now, what's under here? Izuku's jaw dropped at what he was seeing. This was probably the most impossible sight he ever could have laid his eyes on. It was indeed a vehicle, one that was partially covered by a tarp. But it was one that many would be hard-pressed to see in person nowadays, probably only in an automotive museum if they were lucky. It was a pre-quirk car, one that was obviously quite old and rusty, but still appeared to be mostly intact. Its headlights were alright, its chassis was still in place, its body was pretty rusty, but the young boy could see hints of yellow paint in certain spots, and its tires were all flat, but they were still there. The front of the car appeared to be round and bulbous, and its bumper was just barely hanging on, something that Izuku was surprised by. How can this thing still even be here? He said out loud to himself before spinning around and cupping his hands over his mouth. Hey, All Might. I found something that you might wanna come check out. Young Midoriya. Came a deep, yet somewhat raspy voice from behind the heaps of scrap. A few moments later, a near skeleton of a human being appeared, his clothes hanging so loosely from his body that they almost seemed like they'd fall off at a moment's notice. His long blonde hair was quite scraggly and his features sharp and angular, his long skinny arms swinging at his sides as he strode forward. This was Toshinori Yagi, aka All Might, the symbol of peace, at least in his true form. The man locked his beady blue eyes onto Izuku with a perplexed face. What did you find, young man? Something important, I take it. Why yeah, you could say that. Izuku pointed a shaky finger over to the car and said, look. Toshinori set his eyes over onto the vehicle, and let out a surprised yell, causing blood to splatter out from his mouth. It was something that Izuku had gotten used to seeing, given the injuries that All Might had sustained long ago. Gah! After letting out a few coughs and wiping the blood away, Toshinori stepped up and set a hesitant hand onto the vehicle, the man in utter disbelief that he was actually touching one of these things. Young Midoriya, this is quite the find. A smile came to his face as he turned back to his protege. Do you know what this is? Why yes, but I've only seen these in pictures. Izuku set his eyes on the car once again as All Might pulled the tarp back a bit more, or as much as the scrap covering the car would allow. It's a Volkswagen Beetle. Correct, young man, Toshinori confirmed as he began dusting off the hood of the car. And I must say, this is in surprisingly good condition. People all over the world used to drive these things around before quirks, you know. They were quite popular in the 1900s, especially in America and Germany. Why yeah, but, what's one of them doing here of all places? Izuku asked. And in this kind of condition. The metal should have rusted to dust by now. All the symbol of peace could do was shrug his shoulders. Who can say? Perhaps it was a restoration piece that had to be constantly maintained and the previous owner was unable to handle the upkeep. Izuku stepped forward and locked his eyes onto the front of the car, staring into its headlights. It was somewhat of an odd feeling, but he could swear that the car was gazing back at him, staring directly into his soul. Do you think it could be restored? I mean, it'd be a shame if we'd have to scrap it. Oh, don't even think about that, young Midoriya. Toshinori said as he stepped away from the Beetle, giving himself some good space between him and the car. I wouldn't even think about scrapping a find like this without seeing if it can be restored. In fact, I have a friend who I'm pretty certain can fix it. A bright smile came to Izuku's face at this news. Really? That's great. Indeed, and he lives close by in Tokyo as well, so getting this to him should be pretty easy. All Might waved his hand at his protege, ushering him to stand clear. Now, I suggest you take a few steps back, because it's going to take some extra power to get it out from under there. The quirk inheritor stood clear as All Might entered his muscle form, the skinny man now becoming a practical titan at 7'2", filling out his baggy clothes. At the same time, his hair became less messy and his two long bangs stood up on end, giving him a more heroic look. An ear-to-ear toothy smile graced his face as it became more dynamic, his eyes being obscured by shadows. Izuku wisely got out of the way as All Might did his thing. The symbol of peace cracked his neck a few times before spreading his arms out to his sides, his palms facing inward. Tennessee, smash. All Might then brought his hands together in a thunderous clap, whipping up a huge gust of wind at the same time. Much to Izuku's amazement, the whipping wind blew off most of the scrap along with the tarp, leaving the Beetle completely unscathed. Whoa. How did you practice, young Midoriya? All Might said as he stepped back toward the Beetle. You would be surprised at how handy it is when it comes to criminals holding other people hostage. Then, with one hand, All Might lifted the Beetle off of the ground as gently as he could, hoping that no parts would fall off in the process. Amazingly, none did, and he faced Izuku with another nod. I'll swing by my friend's place and drop this miraculous find off, but when I get back, I hope to see the truck loaded up with more scrap. Think you can do that before I get back, young man? Izuku smiled happily and gave the symbol of peace a salute. Yes sir, All Might. Very good, All Might said with a salute back. Well, I'll see you in a bit. With that, the large man performed a mighty leap and practically flew up into the air, still carrying the Volkswagen in one hand. Izuku couldn't help but beam up to his hero in admiration, but then his smile faltered as he realized he still needed to get more scrap into the truck. He faced the storage unit he had moved, let out a small groan and began pushing on it again, all while thinking back to the beetle that he had found. Why did I get the strange feeling that it was looking at me? After that day on the beach, the months continued to pass, and it had transitioned from summer into fall before anyone knew it. In that time, Izuku was giving it his all in the training program that All Might had set up for him, and then some. Every day it was work and more work, be it studying, clearing the beach, exercising, or even eating the right meals. Izuku barely had any time for himself at this point, but he didn't care. He needed to push himself, otherwise he would never make it into UA. And that's where Izuku found himself now, running down a park path while carrying a huge safe on his shoulder. Meanwhile, All Might was in front of him in his skinny form, the skeletal man wearing a rather nice trench coat and scarf as he rode on his Segway. However, Izuku was beginning to feel his overexertion begin to take its toll on him, the teen beginning to feel woozy and disoriented. In the end, he tripped and fell onto his face, dropping the safe next to him with a clunk. This didn't go unnoticed by Toshinori, the blonde man stopping and looking back to see the green-haired boy sprawled out across the ground and breathing raggedly. Hey, kid, look alive now. You've only got 3 months left until the entrance exams. What are you gonna give up after all this work? Just flush it all down the toilet and take it easy. After a few moments with no response and seeing his protege struggling to at least crawl, Toshinori quickly realized what had happened. You're overworked, he stated, stepping off his moped to get closer to the boy. The aim to pass American Dream plan was made with your body in mind. It was fine-tuned to ensure your progress was swift, but manageable. Toshinori's eyes lightly narrowed as he continued. Which means, you haven't been sticking to it. You're overdoing things. That's going to give us the exact opposite of what we want. I have to work harder. Izuku clenched at the ground he was crawling on, clawing up the dirt with his fingers. Or else I won't stand a chance against the other applicants. Toshinori was taken aback by the inheritor's statement, but Izuku continued as he brought his head up. I don't just want into UA, I want to excel. I want to be like you. This made Toshinori's eyes widen, seeing Izuku pick himself up despite how exhausted he was. I want to be the greatest hero in the world. So I'll keep trying, until I got what it takes to do that. As he witnessed this, Toshinori thought back to the first day he had met young Midoriya, thinking on a certain statement he had said, I want people to see my fearless smile and feel safe. And be just like you. Gotta hand it to the kid, he's put a lot of thought to the future. With that thought in All Might's mind, he buffed up into his muscle form and picked Izuku up by the collar of his track suit, holding him up just above the ground. That fighting spirit's what I like about you, fanboy. It serves you well. I do get your concerns, but that said, now is not the time to rush progress. He raised a finger and pointed at the limp form of Izuku as the boy simply continued to hang from his own tracksuit. Fear not, because I can get you back on track. Leave it to this old man to adjust your plan. You're not an old man, All Might. Izuku managed to struggle out, making All Might let out a hearty laugh. Ah ha ha ha. However, after his brief chortle, All Might set Izuku down, the green-haired boy practically dead on his feet. By the way, there was something that I wanted to mention to you. I was going to wait until after this training session was over, but I suppose now is as good a time as any. This managed to get Izuku's attention. You remember that beetle we found a few months back? The inheritor blinked in surprise. Why yeah, I do, but, wait, Izuku smiled in excitement. Has it been fixed? A sheepish expression came to All Might's face. Well, sort of. My friend says that, for all intents and purposes, the beetle is 100% operational. However, he said he had to call in some help for a few additional things he found inside the car that he hadn't accounted for. He held up a hand and whispered to Izuku. And he also said that these additional things were quite important, and that we should come over to his auto shop so that we could discuss them. Izuku blinked at that. Whoa, really? Sounds pretty important, then. You've got that right, young Midoriya. And, considering how fatigued you no doubt are, we will be taking the rest of the day off to do just that. All Might crouched down and ushered for Izuku to climb onto his back. Now come. We're burning daylight, you know. Izuku nodded and climbed on, though All Might made sure to give Izuku a small warning. Now, remember what I told you about flying and keeping your face low. We don't want a repeat of last time, correct? Izuku couldn't help but grimace at that. The first time that he had sailed through the air with All Might, he had made the mistake of keeping his eyes and mouth open, resulting in his eyelids and cheeks being blown in the wind. It wasn't a pleasant sight, according to All Might. Yes sir, I know. Good. Now here we go. With that, All Might leapt up into the air, making sure to grab his Segway before he did so. After literally only a few minutes, the One for All user and his student made it to the main city of Tokyo, where All Might immediately let a shaking Izuku down from his back. And here we are. And good job, young Midoriya, you stayed pretty steady the whole way. Why yeah, I sure did. Izuku stuttered as he continued to shake like a leaf. However, once he noticed where they were, he blinked a couple times in confusion. He glanced around to see that they were on a small back street in the middle of Tokyo, though he could see the busier sections of the city just beyond the nearby buildings. Wait, where are we anyway? Take a look for yourself. All Might gestured in front of them, indicating a large building with 2 garage doors on its front. Izuku craned his head up, noticing a sign over the 2 garage doors that read in kanji, Hatsume Auto Repair. All Might gave Izuku a light pat on the back, which still ended up making the feeble teen trip up a bit. Yep, the friend that I mentioned runs this business. Come on, he should be waiting inside. The symbol of peace ushered his protege through the front door and into the main lobby, where he lifted his hand to his face and called out. Yo, Yusei, where are you at? Not a minute later, and a man in navy blue, grease-stained coveralls came strolling through the door behind the front desk, his gloved hand going to the brim of his red cap to tip it to the hero. There were 2 things that stood out most to Izuku, though, the first being his shaggy pink hair and matching 5 o'clock shadow. Though Izuku didn't exactly blink at it, he himself did have green hair after all. What he noticed most though were the man's eyes. They were bright red and his irises looked like target reticles. Hey, All Might. Good to see you, my friend. The man, Yusei greeted, giving All Might a handshake. Glad you could make it. He glanced down to Izuku and gave him a nod. Ah, and this must be the student you mentioned. Indeed. Yusei, this is Izuku Midoriya. All Might set a hand to Izuku's shoulder. And young Midoriya, this is Yusei Hatsume. He's a friend that I once went to middle school with. He also happens to be the best damn auto mechanic in all of Japan. He then gave his student a thumbs up. And don't worry, he knows about my, condition. He's right on all accounts. And don't let anyone tell ya different about the greatest mechanic part. Yusei winked as he shook Izuku's hand. I take great pride in that title. I see. Izuku nodded. Well, it's very nice to meet you. However, the more he made eye contact with Yusei, the more Izuku couldn't help but ask. If you don't mind me asking, what's your quirk? Yusei laughed and pointed to his eyes. Haha, let me guess, the eyes are freaking ya out, huh? Oh, and no sir. Izuku insisted. In fact, they're really cool. It's just, I'm fascinated with how a lot of quirks work, and... I get ya. Yusei nodded, indicating his eyes again. Well, if that's the case, then I'll tell ya. My quirk is called, Transport Target. It allows me to lock onto any broken part of a vehicle and analyze it so that my brain immediately knows how to fix it. And that's pretty much how I got to be where I am today. Izuku immediately lit up in admiration. Oh wow, that's really cool. I'll bet you can fix just about any car, huh? However, Yusei visibly winced at that. Yeah, you see, that might have been called into question the moment All Might brought me that beetle. The green-haired teen blinked in confusion. Wait, I thought you said you fixed it. I did, but, not without help. Yusei sighed. See, the part that was a normal Volkswagen Beetle was easy to fix, but as I dug deeper into it, I noticed that it wasn't just a normal bug. He craned his head up to All Might. And that's why I wanted you two to come here today. To see just what we're dealing with here. It's a bit disconcerting. All Might's brow furrowed, but his smile didn't waver. You suppose it could be something dangerous? Potentially. Why do ya think I wanted you of all people here? Yusei replied snarkily before waving them toward the door on the other side of the room, leading to the garage. Come on, with any luck, my, darling assistant should be finishing up as we speak. Izuku could hear a bit of irritation in the man's voice. Is there something wrong with your assist? Boom. Without warning, a huge explosion could be heard from the garage, with black smoke beginning to pour out from the seams in the door. What was that? Chapter 2, Bonding, It had been about a month and a half since the discovery of the robot that had been dubbed Bumblebee, and in that time, autumn had transitioned smoothly into winter and quite a bit had happened for Izuku. Of course, his training with All Might had been going as per usual, and he was now on a much steadier regimen while also working harder. So now, he found himself much less exhausted, and with each passing day, his strength began to grow more and more. In fact, it was so noticeable that May had even taken to calling him Muscles from time to time, something that had flustered him every time. Speaking of the pink-haired engineer, she had for all intents and purposes became one of Izuku's first real friends in a long time. Sure, she was overly exuberant and intimidated him multiple times with just how overly passionate she was whenever she got going about her babies. In fact, that was a topic that came up a whole bunch with her, especially when they blew up in the garage. But Izuku had also gotten a lot more comfortable with talking to her as well, especially when it came to Bumblebee. As for Bumblebee himself, he had sequestered to staying in Yusei's shop for the most part. Which was good because he had plenty of space to move around, provided that Yusei kept things mostly out of the way. Once in a while, Yusei would take him outside for a drive around the city, just to help familiarize Bee with the layout of the area should they go out for something. Also, Yusei had made something very clear to Bumblebee. No transforming outside, the mechanic had warned. Period. We don't need anybody seeing you, Bee, so whenever you're out and about, stay in vehicle mode. After that, Yusei proceeded to put up black tarps over the windows of his garage doors, making very sure that no one could peer inside and see the big yellow bot. But that didn't stop May from convincing the mech to take her and Izuku out for a little joyride. And that's where Izuku found himself now, in the back seat of a Beetle that, for all intents and purposes, was driving itself. Thankfully, the streets weren't all that busy at the moment, so there wasn't anyone who could see them. Still, that didn't exactly settle Izuku's nerves all that much. I still think this is a bad idea. Izuku muttered as he twiddled his fingers. What if someone catches us? However, May simply gave him a reassuring slap on the back. Come on, Muscles. Bee needs to stretch his legs and Uncle Yu's away getting some special parts. So what else are we gonna do for the day? Izuku gave her a questioning look. That does not sound like you at all, May. I know. May hung her head in disappointment. Okay, to tell ya the truth, my parents recommend that I take at least an hour of my day away from the work desk and get some fresh air. And trust me, they'll know if I don't do it, even if I'm not home. Wow, that must be hard for you. Izuku said. I know, right? Quote. May exclaimed, throwing her head back against the seat. I keep telling them that I can't afford just take time off if I wanna get into UA's support class, but they seem dead set on telling me that it's good to get outside every once in a while. May crossed her arms and huffed. How am I supposed to finalize the super cute baby I'm making that'll wow the teachers at UA if I don't spend every single waking moment perfecting it? Izuku furrowed his brows a bit in thought, remembering the day that she had told him about her aspirations to make it to UA's support course. Izuku jogged down the sidewalk through Tokyo, taking to the back roads before he saw Hatsume Auto Repair appear in the distance. It had been almost 24 hours since he had met Bumblebee, and, after his training with All Might was complete for that day, he was eager to get back and see the yellow bot again. Izuku smiled and picked up his speed before entering the store, calling out to its owner. Mr. Hatsume. I'm back. A few moments later, Yusei came walking down from the hallway, setting his reticle eyes onto the green-haired young man. Midoriya. Good to see that you found your way back here no problem. He jerked his thumb in the garage's direction. So, I take it you're here to see Bee. Why yes sir. Izuku nodded. Hey, well, he's right in the garage. But be careful in there, okay? See, boom. At the sound of the explosion from the garage, Izuku let out a yelp and Yusei sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose while lowering his head. Mei's been here for a while and she's been multitasking. Just make sure not to get too close to her inventions, okay? Izuku swallowed fearfully and nodded. In truth, Izuku was still utterly nervous about interacting with the rather excitable girl, especially since blowing things up seemed to be one of her specialties. Oh okay. He managed squeaked out before going toward the door, only to be greeted with a room full of smoke. Izuku waved the smoke away, coughing a little bit before calling out, "B Bumblebee. Hatsume. Are you two okay?" Midoriya. All of a sudden, Mei's face suddenly burst out through the smoke, giving the greenie an ear-to-ear smile and making him jump in shock. "Just the person that I was waiting for. Come over here for a sec, would ya? I need to test something." Test something. What are you? Whoa. Without warning, Mei suddenly took Izuku by the wrist and led him out of the smoke, bringing him over toward Bumblebee. The big yellow bot brightened up and gave out a few happy buzzing sounds, waving to Izuku with a happy expression. Hee, gee, good to see you too, Bumblebee. Whoa. Izuku was suddenly plonked down into a swivel chair near one of the work desks, with Mei reaching for something on said desk. "Okay, so here's something that I've been tinkering with for a good while now." The Pinkett presented Izuku with what looked to be a large, metal glove. This obviously confused the quirk inheritor greatly, but Mei didn't even blink as she asked, "So, what do you think?" I'm confused." Izuku answered. What is this, anyway?" Mei tapped the metal glove with an eager smile. "Okay, so listen up. This baby is a support item made for people with strength-enhancing quirks." She took the glove and put it over Izuku's hand, who was surprised when he felt that the inside felt just like a normal glove. Ya know how a lot of heroes never really wear anything to protect their hands. I mean, as cool as All Might is, even he goes into fights barehanded. So, to keep them from busting their hands open whenever they hit, like, a really hard villain or something, they could just use one of these babies to help them out. Plus, the fact that they're metal means that they can hit even harder. Izuku had to admit, the garment was surprisingly very light for how clunky it looked. But from just knocking his knuckles against it, he could tell that it was also incredibly durable. Even Bumblebee was fascinated by the garment, the robot tilting his head in curiosity. Wow, Hatsume. This does feel pretty good, though it is a bit clunky. Don't worry about that. Mei winked. This is only the preliminary design for this baby. Once I'm at UA, I can start working on better designs for it that are more streamlined. Izuku's eyes widened at that. Wait, you want to go to UA? Hi. Mei placed her hands on her hips. Sure do. I've got my sights zoomed in on the support course. And once I'm in there, I'll have plenty of time and funds to do what I wanna do most, work on my super cute babies. She put her hand to Izuku's and brought the glove up, cuddling with it as if it were her own offspring. And this particular baby is gonna help me get in. Despite himself, Izuku couldn't help but blush. He knew that Mei wasn't trying to cuddle with him, but the fact that there was a girl making physical contact with him, it was still almost a bit too much. Wow, why you seem pretty determined to get in, Hatsume. I hope things go well for you. Because honestly, I'm trying to get into UA's hero course, so I know how you feel. So that's why you're training under All Might. Mei crossed her arms over her chest. Well, that makes sense, I guess. Who better to have as a physical trainer than UA's best graduate? BZZRT. At the sound of a curious buzz, Izuku and Mei turned to Bumblebee, who was giving them a confused face. Oh, right, you don't know what we're talking about, do you, B? Izuku asked, prompting B to shake his head. Well, in our world, superpowers, or quirks, as we call them, are pretty commonplace. And, inevitably, there are people who do bad things with their own quirks. But in turn, a lot of other people often go to special schools and learn to use their quirks to become heroes. Or to learn how to create the best gear for said heroes. Mei added cheekily. Izuku nodded at that. Alright, and that's what we're hoping to do. The entrance exams for UA are only in a couple months, so we both have to be ready for them. Bumblebee nodded his head in understanding as Izuku set his sights back to Mei, lifting the glove up to her. By the way, what is this glove made out of? Oh, a magnesium-based alloy. Mei explained. Super lightweight, but incredibly durable. She jerked her thumb over her shoulder. Go ahead, take a swing at something and tell me how it feels. The green-haired boy got up and went over to one of the car lifts, giving it his best punch. As he expected, he didn't leave a huge dent in it, but he had to admit, he barely felt that hit thanks to the glove. Haha, wow. That actually worked really well. I could hardly feel a thing. Mei pumped a fist in victory. Nice. Now do it again, but use your quirk this time. It was at that moment that Izuku paled, his pupils shrinking to the size of peas. Here's the thing, actually, I can't. Mei and B both tilted their heads. What do you mean, you can't, Midoriya? Well, Izuku rubbed the back of his head as his face flushed red. Why you see, I kind of don't have a quirk. At that moment, you could hear a pin drop, the room was so silent. Mei and Bumblebee could only stare at Izuku with surprised expressions, the pink-haired girl blinking a couple times before realizing what he had just said. You're training under All Might, to get into UA. And you don't have a quirk. This only made Izuku more fearful. Her statement felt very judgmental. Had he just lost out on the one friendship he seemed to be making? Well, yes. A long time passed and Mei closed her eyes, a smile coming to her face. Wow, that's pretty gutsy. The Pinkett gave a shrug. But I guess I'm not one to judge. I mean, if someone like Me with no flashy or ultra-powerful quirk were trying to gun it for the hero course, I'd probably be seen as insane. Wait, are you saying you're not judging me for it? Izuku stammered out. For trying to apply for UA without a quirk. What? Nah, why would I? Mei shrugged. I mean, if All Might thinks that you could have a shot, then why would I doubt you? He must see something in you if he thinks you can get in. Next to her, Bumblebee let out an approving buzz and gave Izuku a thumbs up. Mei followed soon after. Besides, if you do get it, that means I can make a ton of gear for you so that you won't die. So let's both get into UA, Izuku couldn't help but smile again, giving his own thumbs up right back at the two. Why yeah, let's do it. In hindsight, though, Izuku was kicking himself for what he agreed to. The fact that she volunteered to make gear for him was awesome, but he would be getting, one for all, soon enough. That meant that he both wouldn't need said gear, and that he had technically lied about not having a quirk, at least not yet. Man, what am I gonna say to her once I actually do get, one for all, though? Izuku thought to himself. I need to make something up for that or else everyone's gonna get suspicious. Hey, Midoriya, we're here. Izuku's attention was garnered by Mei, causing him to look up out of the window. There, he saw that they were approaching Dagoba Beach, the place where he suggested they go to. There were a couple of reasons for this, actually. The first being because the green-haired boy figured that the piles of trash would make for the perfect obstruction so that Bumblebee could transform without being seen. After all, B was only about 13 feet tall, and considering how high the trash was stacked, the mountains of garbage all easily dwarfed the bot pretty easily. The second reason for Izuku suggesting the spot was, well, because Mei was curious about where he was training, so he thought he'd oblige her. He didn't want to be rude to his new friend. After all, wow, that still feels really weird to think. Have I really not had friends in that long? However, he mentally slapped himself for that thought alone. Yeah, probably. Kacchan certainly hasn't been your friend for a while. The moment he thought of the ashen blonde explosion Korok user, Izuku grimaced and let out a sigh. Katsuki Bakugo, or Kacchan, as Izuku referred to him, had used to be a really good friend of his, about 11 years ago when they were 4. But the moment Katsuki got his quirk, he had changed, and not for the better. Throughout the next 11 years, he bullied and tormented Izuku, with Katsuki even giving him the insulting nickname of Deku. And all because Izuku didn't have a quirk. Eventually, all of Aldera Middle School began to treat him the way that Katsuki had, and that was the major reason why Izuku Midoriya became known as the loser who had no friends. At least until now. Izuku was jostled from his negative thoughts when Bumblebee pulled to a stop on the beach, with Mei tapping him on the shoulder. "Come on, what are ya spacing out for, Midoriya?" the pink kid asked with a grin. Oh, sorry. I was just lost in my thoughts." Izuku opened the back door and stepped out, smiling a little to himself as he did. "Enough with the negativity, Izuku. You've got friends now, and Kacchan's not even here. Focus on what you came here to do and you'll be fine." Izuku took a brief glance around the beach to make sure that no one was there. And much to his relief, there wasn't. He pat Bumblebee's roof and gave him a grin. "Oh okay, we're all clear. WHRRTSCHZZTSCHZZTSCHZZTSCHK." The moment they heard that sound, Izuku and Mei watched on as Bumblebee transformed, though they had to cover their faces when the transformation resulted in sand being kicked up onto them. "Blah. Probably should have seen that coming," Mei said as she spat out some sand that had gotten into her mouth. Bumblebee had a panicked look on his face after what he had done, with Izuku wiping the sand off of his face. Well, it definitely could have been worse. The quirk inheritor said before. Without warning, Bumblebee crouched down and began using his large, metal hands to get the sand out of the duo's hair. Oh, don't worry, we're fine. Yeah, we're good, thanks," Mei assured as B let out an apologetic buzz. Izuku sighed as Bumblebee stood back up to his full height, though the bot still appeared to be quite sheepish after what he had done. "Wow, is this what it feels like to look at someone else like me?" He sent a smile up to Bumblebee and put a hand on his leg. "Hey, no harm done, okay B. Everything's good." B sighed and relaxed his shoulders, sitting himself down on the ground as he did. And thus, it was then that Izuku decided to bring up the third reason for this beach excursion, disguise training. "Oh okay, B, I want you to listen closely." His words instantly grabbed Bumblebee's attention. "Over the past month, keeping you in Mr. Hatsume's garage has gotten a bit more difficult. He runs a pretty big business, and we've already had a ton of close calls with a lot of customers of his." "He's right," Mei agreed. "You do remember what nearly happened with Miss Shiragami, right?" A worried expression came to Bumblebee's face as he recalled the incident, with him having almost crushed the woman's red car underfoot before frantically transforming to hide himself. "Exactly. If anyone were to find out about you, especially the wrong kind of people, they'd probably come to lock you up in a lab somewhere and cut you into tiny little pieces." This definitely got Bumblebee's attention, the bot springing to his feet and letting out an alarmed, "Beast. Beast. Why yeah, it'll be bad. Trust me." Izuku gulped as Bumblebee lowered himself to their eye level. The green-haired boy put his hand on Bumblebee's, giving the mech a serious, yet caring expression. Remember, the only one you can show yourself to is us, Mr. Hatsume, and All Might." Bumblebee gave Izuku a nod, prompting the boy to back away a bit. So that's why we're here, to practice your hiding skills. Are you ready?" Bumblebee nodded to him and Mei gave the yellow bot a grin. "Great. So when you see anyone besides us, what do you do?" Bumblebee's optics widened and he transformed immediately, the beetle hitting the sand with a thud. Izuku gave B a thumbs up. Hey, great. Perfect, now you can come back." Bumblebee transformed back into robot mode, his concentration still focused squarely onto his duo of human friends. "Okay, so now, let's say that we're driving along the road, and then all of a sudden we get..." "Oh shoot." Mei suddenly whipped her head to the side briefly, pretending to see someone approaching. "Somebody's coming. Quick, hide, B. Hide." With that, Mei and Izuku both bolted behind one of the scrap piles, the two hearing what sounded like B converting into vehicle mode all the while. After a few seconds, the duo peeked out from behind their hiding place, and saw that B had actually ducked his head behind a very small mound of sand, with the rest of his body sticking up plain as day. Izuku and Mei both deadpanned at the sight before standing up, the former speaking up to his robotic friend. "B, are you serious?" Bumblebee peeked out from behind his sandhill and performed a tuck and roll, transforming into beetle mode all while Izuku and Mei approached him. "B, it's too late. Why, you're already dead." "Yeah, your reaction time needs to get a lot better," Mei added as Bumblebee transformed once more, keeping crouched low while bowing his head apologetically. The Pinkett sighed and rolled her eyes as she reached up and placed a hand on Bee's cheek plate. It's all right. This is why we're practicing. Bumblebee let out a buzz that sounded almost like a sigh. But then his head perked up and he sent his sights skyward, his optics widening as he saw something, or rather someone approaching. BZZRT, Brazit. He pointed up toward the sky, prompting Izuku and Mei to do so as well. W what? Izuku asked. W what's wrong, B? Ah. THOOM. All of a sudden, something landed directly next to the trio, kicking up a whole wave of sand in the process. Bumblebee shielded Izuku and Mei with his body before all three of them set their eyes upon none other than All Might. And despite the big grin on his face, they could tell that there was just a small bit of frustration etched into his features. Young Midoriya, young Hatsume, All Might glanced up toward the now visibly worried robot. Bumblebee. Just what are you three doing here? Izuku let out a nervous chuckle at his mentor's sudden appearance. All Might. Hey. Well, we were just, practicing. We were practicing helping Bumblebee with his transforming reaction time, why in case somebody shows up at the garage without warning. All Might crossed his arms at that. I see, and you decided to not do it at the garage because. Mei tapped her fingers together, knowing that theirs wasn't exactly the best excuse. Hee, well, we just thought it would be good for B to stretch his legs outside, I mean, he's been in my uncle's garage for over a month and the only time he gets to go outside, he's stuck in vehicle mode. She gestured toward the trash mounds. So Midoriya thought that since the trash here is so high, B could transform and not worry about anyone seeing him here. Plus I'm required to take at least an hour-long break every day, so really, this is really my fault. I see, All Might said before craning his head toward Izuku, his protege instantly breaking out into a worried face. Mei had a guilty expression on her own features while Bumblebee was practically shaking at this point, before then transforming back into beetle mode again out of fear. All Might let out a sigh and lowered his head. Listen, kids, I'm not mad or angry with you. I'm honestly not. But when I got the call from Yusei about you three not being at the shop when he got back, we both feared for the worst. The teens looked surprised by that news, especially Mei. Oh, I guess he got back early. Not exactly, he forgot his wallet at the shop and went back to go get it. All Might clarified. All the same, he was quite worried about you all. I commend your forward thinking to keep B hidden while outside, but perhaps it's best if we keep him at the garage unless Yusei is with you. But, All Might, I don't know if we'll be able to keep B there for much longer if he doesn't learn how to hide himself better. Izuku glanced back toward Bumblebee, who was buzzing through his radio. We've already had a ton of close calls with a lot of customers over the past month, and Young Midoriya, with all due respect, Bumblebee runs a bigger chance at being discovered out here a lot more than anywhere else. All Might countered. Even if this beach is mostly deserted, there is still the slightest chance that people could come here. He put a hand on Izuku's shoulder. I appreciate you trying to give Bumblebee the feeling of freedom, especially when he resides in such a cramped space, but I think it's best if you have him remain in the garage until a better solution can be found. All right. Izuku gazed up to his mentor before lowering his head, giving a saddened sigh. Why yes sir. I understand. Sorry. Yeah, me too. Mei added with a bow of her head. Bumblebee transformed and lowered his head to All Might, to which the symbol of peace gave a wave. It's no problem, kids. Really. I understand that having Bumblebee reside at a business isn't exactly the best place for him either. All Might snapped his fingers as a thought entered his head. Tell you what, I think I might know a place where Bumblebee can hide that's a bit more convenient. I have a small getaway house on the outskirts of Tokyo that has a small garage. It's private property as well, so nobody goes there without my permission. Simply give me a week or so to get things sorted and I'll let you know when I can get him in there. Both Izuku and Mei brightened up at the idea. Wow, really? That'd be great. Yeah, it'd be a lot more convenient than having him stay where people could accidentally see him. Mei agreed. However, she then realized something rather important. Wait a minute, if it's a getaway home, she glanced up to Bumblebee worriedly. Wouldn't that mean that B would be all by himself? Bumblebee's features also grew quite concerned, to which All Might put a hand to his chin. You make a good point. However, he then gave a shrug. But you know what? A little commute is nothing for me, really, so what the hey? I'll stay there with him during the nights. Bumblebee immediately brightened up at that and raised his arms in victory, letting out a happy buzz before giving All Might a salute. All Might chuckled and returned it. Think nothing of it, Bumblebee. It's the least I can do. Now, I suggest that you all get back to the garage. Yusei's waiting for you, after all. Oh, right. Izuku nodded as Bumblebee transformed back into beetle mode, opening his back doors for him and May to get in. Thanks again, All Might. It means a lot, really. I'll see you here tomorrow. Indeed, you will. All Might waved. Farewell for now, young Midoriya. With that, Izuku and May piled into Bumblebee's back seat and the bug drove off down the beach, rolling up a nearby ramp before disappearing down the road. With that, All Might let out a breath and deflated into his skinny form, grateful that he had gotten the talk over with when he did. Thank God, that's over with. However, Toshinori's beady eyes widened in realization. Crap, B's probably going to be seeing me in this form, isn't he? He slapped his forehead and groaned at what he had just done. Great, just great. The moment that Bumblebee rolled in through the opening garage door, the disguised robot was met with the harsh glare of Yusei Hatsume, making him stop in his tracks. The beetle began to tremble a bit as Yusei's glare bore into him, though the man let out a sigh and rubbed his forehead as he made the garage door close. B, I'm not mad at you, really I'm not. He crossed his arms as he stepped in front of the beetle, giving B an expectant look. However, I do want a word with the kids. Bumblebee stopped trembling, and immediately opened his back doors, moving himself so that he jostled both Izuku and May out of him before he transformed. The yellow mech bowed apologetically and buzzed out, BZZZT, BZT, BZZT BZZT, BZZZRT. Almost as if he were frantically apologizing. Yusei smirked and jerked his head to the right. You're excused, B. All is forgiven. May gave B a small pout as he stood up tall again. PFF, thanks for being a snitch, B. She turned back to her uncle and raised her hands, the man giving his niece a raised brow. Now, Uncle Yu, I know this looks bad, but... Bad. Yusei gestured over to Bumblebee without taking his eyes off his niece. You just took 4-meter-tall robot out on a joy ride. Well, yeah, May mumbled. B, but we didn't get caught by anyone, so that's a plus. Also, I got in my hour away from the work table like my parents require me to. That's not the point and you know it, young lady. Yusei scolded. I know that keeping Bumblebee in this cramped space is a hassle, but it's a hassle that we have to afford. It was then that Izuku decided to speak up. Well, that might not be something we have to worry about for much longer, Mr. Hatsume. Yusei shifted his eyes over to Izuku, ushering the boy to go on. Why you see, All Might said that he might be able to give B a better living space at a getaway house of his just outside Tokyo. He said that he only need a week or so to get things ready. Yusei's eyes widened at this. Really? Well, that's actually pretty convenient. He glanced up toward Bumblebee with a curious look. But would it work? I mean, if he's going to be living in a house, that sounds even more cramped than my own garage. Well, yeah, but the difference is that All Might's getaway house is on private property. Izuku explained. Meaning that B can move around outside as much as he wants and no one will see him. Well, that actually sounds like a sweet deal. Yusei admitted. Though I take it that you'll probably still bring him around here from time to time. He jutted his thumb toward the workbench behind him with all of May's things strewn about the room. Besides, I doubt that All Might would want his home to be blown up. Both Izuku winced at that while May just rolled her eyes. Yeah, it would probably be for the best if we just kept working on B here. Izuku agreed. The Pinkett folded her arms and sighed. Yeah, I guess. However, her eyes then suddenly widened when she remembered something important. Oh, shoot. I was gonna get back to work finishing that insignia, but before she could do so, her uncle shot an arm out to block her path, giving her a stern face. Once again, May rolled her eyes and sighed. I promise that I'll never take B out for a joy ride again. Happy. For now, yes. Yusei lowered his arm and jerked his head toward the workbench. We'll talk more about this when I get back. Right now, I need to go and get those parts. I'll see you two when I get back, got it? Why yes sir, Mr. Hatsume. Izuku and Bumblebee both saluted as Yusei left the room, leaving the trio to their own devices. Oh okay, so what should we do now? Whoosh. Without warning, a blur of pink suddenly shot past Izuku, causing the green-haired teen to spin around in place. He managed to stop himself and shake his head, trying to straighten out his vision. Whoa, what the? Once he gained his bearings, Izuku saw that it was, in fact, Mei, and she seemed to be on quite the tear as she set her soldering iron down next to Bumblebee. She waved her hand toward herself and smiled up to the yellow bot. Okay, B, let's take one last look at ya. Sit down for me, K. Bumblebee let out a low buzz and complied, sitting down with his legs extended. Mei stood up and took up her soldering iron, placing herself just above Bumblebee's left foot. Okay, let's finish what we've started. She lowered her goggles and went to work, using her quirk to zoom in on the fine details of the circuitry she was working with. Izuku strolled over to Mei and B, setting his sights onto the red face insignia that the former was working on. So, do you really think this could be a clue to where B came from? I mean, it's the best thing we have to go on. Mei answered without taking her eyes off her work. Besides, out of all of the things on him, this symbol stands out the most, don't ya think? Well, you've got a good point there. Izuku admitted, glancing up toward Bumblebee all the while. So, B, W what do you think? With another buzz Bumblebee gave a small shrug, an unsure face etched across his metal features. Yeah, I'm a little unsure myself. I mean, who knows what we could discover with CHK. Izuku paused for a moment when he heard a sudden sparking sound, and then, Mei let out a sudden yell. Ah! Izuku whipped head around to see Mei having stepped back from Bumblebee's foot, the red insignia having started sparking for some reason. Hatsume. What did you? I don't know. Mei said, still startled as she watched the insignia start to spark. I just soldered 2 more circuits together and BBVVVVNN. Without warning, a sudden loud sound came directly from the insignia, the face lighting up with a brighter red. Oh, that can't be good. Mei ran over to Midoriya and tackled him to the ground before spinning back around toward Bumblebee. B. Brace yourself. Bumblebee's optics widened and he let out a scared buzz, screwing his blue orbs shut in preparation for what was about to happen. After a few seconds, though, what graced their ears wasn't an explosion, but rather, a small shwoom. The trio opened their eyes, and were utterly floored by what they saw. From the insignia on Bumblebee's foot, a large hologram suddenly began projecting itself, and it was of yet another robot. This bot stood at least 25 feet tall, and they could tell that he appeared to be very strong given the build of his body. His torso and arms appeared to be primarily red while his lower legs, head and hands were mainly blue, with bits of white and silver seen throughout his body as well. There were 2 sets of wheels folded into the inside of his legs while another single set were folded into the sides of his body, making it apparent that he too could change into a vehicle form. And if that weren't evidence enough, then the practical truck cab that was his entire chest was only further evidence to that fact, with the windows forming his pecs while the grille formed his abdomen. In addition, there were also smokestacks on each of his shoulders. His head was very angular, with a forehead crest that had what appeared to be silver intakes on it. He also had a pair of long antennae on each side of his head, with 2 facing more toward the front while the larger pair stuck straight up. Also, instead of a mouth, the bot wore a silver face plate over his face, his blue eyes and nose ridge being the only visible facial features they could see. And then, much to the three's surprise, the larger robot spoke. However, it seemed that the message was somewhat garbled. BBB 127, IPP pray this message FF finds you. This is op. ZZZZZRRRKT, Ime. I am sending this message to ZZZZZZRRRRKT. Izuku and Mei stood up, still staring at the large hologram in astonishment. Why you're seeing what I'm seeing, right. The quirk inheritor muttered. How could I not be? Mei whispered, still in shock as the message played on. War rages on. The The red and blue robot continued, making Izuku and Mei do a double take. Did it just say, war? Bumblebee also stared up at it as he laid flat on his back, confused as to what the large bot was trying to tell him. Why your mission, ZRKT, the Ark. Zeked, P protect the planet. O our survival, ZZRKT. However, the moment that the words, Ark, and, survival, were uttered, Bumblebee's optics widened as his mind began to be racked with sudden flashbacks. The little yellow bot began seeing visions of a war-torn planet, one that was on the brink of destruction. There, he saw the large red and blue robot fighting off countless enemies with many other robots by his side, including Bumblebee himself. Then, he heard a loud bang go off in his mind, and there, he saw a large, silver and black robot with piercing red eyes glaring right at him, and that vision was what made him let out a panicked buzz, putting his hand to his face in fright. B. Izuku exclaimed, rushing over to put a hand to Bumblebee's arm. This successfully made Bumblebee stop moving around, his optics opening to see Izuku looking at him in concern. Are you alright? What just happened? Mei let out a gasp as she realized what might have just happened. I think we might have hit a breakthrough. He's starting to remember. Bumblebee set his optics onto Mei briefly before the sound of static shifted his focus back to the hologram of the red and blue bot. Stay safe, my FF friend. I am, ZZZRRKT. And with that, the hologram of the red and blue robot suddenly disappeared, leaving the trio to simply stare at where it once was in utter silence. There was a long pause as they all took in what they had just saw. After a few moments, though, Bumblebee began to sit up again, his optics filled with fear and confusion. Izuku reached up and set his hand on Bumblebee's shoulder in concern. BB, are you okay? Bumblebee set a hand to his head and let out a low moan, still trying to come to grips with what had just happened. BZZZT, BZZZZRRRT. Do you know who that bot was? Mei uttered. If anything, we at least know that you're not the only one of your kind out there. This made B perk up a bit, nodding his head as he pointed upward. He then tapped his head, and from the gaze he was giving her, Mei could tell exactly what he was saying. So you do know that bot. Can you remember anything else? However, at that question, Bumblebee gave another moan, his eyes moving down sadly. Oh, I see. BB, but he mentioned something about AA war, right? Izuku said worriedly, causing both Mei and B to look at him. And he also said something about protecting the planet. Izuku swallowed and locked his eyes with Bumblebee, taking a deep breath. B, if what he said is true then, does that make you an alien? B's optics widened a little at that. And, would that mean that the VW Beetle really is a disguise? To help you hide from something? Bzart. With that low buzz, B folded his arms across his chest, still very unsure what this all could mean. After a moment of silence, Izuku asked one last question. Are you scared? Bumblebee lowered his head at the question, giving Izuku all the answer he needed. He gave the yellow bot a small pat on his chest, giving Bumblebee a reassuring smile. It's okay, B. We'll make sure that nothing hurts you. Exactly. Mei agreed as she too stepped closer and put her hand on B's right arm. And that's a promise. Bumblebee's expression brightened up substantially, the yellow bot letting out a few thankful buzzes of gratitude. Hee, no problem, B. Also, something I noticed, Mei glanced over to Izuku. That big red guy called Bumblebee, B127. Her smirk increased a little. Not to brag, but I think our name sounds a lot better, don't you? Izuku smiled back and laughed. Haha, definitely. The quirk inheritor faced Bumblebee once again with a curious face. So, has this whole thing deterred you any from finding out who you are? BZZBZZ. Bumblebee vehemently shook his head, pointing upwards again for emphasis as he stood up. He then put his hands over his face and furrowed his metal brow, almost as if he were mimicking what that larger bot looked like. Izuku couldn't help but chuckle at the sight of that. I see. So you wanna find out more about that big guy just as much as we do, huh? Bumblebee nodded frantically and gave a thumbs up. BZT. Huh. Well, alright then. Mei grinned, giving a thumbs up right back to him. That said, if we're gonna discover more about you, I think I might have to go a bit deeper than just the surface level. She reached up and grabbed Bumblebee's hand. "B, do you trust me?" To Izuku's surprise, Mei's face was completely and utterly serious, something that he hadn't seen from the Pinkett for the month that he had known her. It was almost foreign to him, but he could tell that it was because she cared about Bumblebee's well-being, and wouldn't do anything to him without his consent. I suppose her social skills are getting better, and I guess mine are, too. Beziard. Bumblebee gave off one more buzz, nodding his head in approval. "Thank you, B," Mei said as she pat the back of B's hand. "And I promise, I'll be absolutely careful with how I handle you. I won't mess with anything I don't understand until I do understand it, okay?" Bumblebee once again gave an approving buzz, grateful that she was so considerate. Izuku took a deep breath and sat down on one of the workbenches, propping his head on one of his hands as he took in everything that had just happened. This turned out to be a very strange day. His eyes glanced upward toward the ceiling, curious as his mind went back to the red robot's message. So, I guess we really aren't alone in this universe after all. However, little did the green-haired boy know, that with the repair of Bumblebee's insignia, a brief, yet noticeable signal had been sent out in the far reaches of space. And it would only be a matter of time, before someone noticed. On a faraway planet outside of Earth's solar system, a duo of tall, imposing red and blue bots were standing before their prey. He was another red bot who was much shorter with a gray, square-shaped helmet and silver face. He was also missing an arm, which the blue bot held in his hand. Both of the taller bots were equal in height and in build, thought they shared noticeable differences. The red bot appeared to be female, with her more slender facial features and fuller metal lips being a big indicator of such. That, and her voice, while low and sinister, was also smooth and feminine. "Where is Optimus Prime?" she asked firmly with her hands behind her back. Other notable features of the femme were that she had a single antenna sticking up from the right side of her helmet, as well as a pair of large wings on her back that had massive VTOLs on them. There was also what appeared to be a tailfin sticking straight up from between her shoulder blades as well as a set of wheels in her shoulders. The red femme continued to speak as the smaller red and gray bot weakly sat down to face them. "He survived the fall of Cybertron, and no rebellion is truly dead until the leader is vanquished." Next to her, her partner threw away the arm, glowering down at the helpless bot as he tried to crawl away. This bot, the blue one, also had wheels in his shoulders as well as two blue panels sticking up behind them. There were a set of rotor blades situated upon his back along with an extra set of wheels in his shins, while in his other hand, he held a double-barreled hand cannon. Though his most notable feature was his faceplate, which appeared to glow green as he talked. Why are we bothering with this puny punk, Shatter?" the thug bot asked. "You know he's just gonna give us the same fragging answer as the rest of them." "Patience, Dropkick." The femme now known as Shatter raised her arm up to her partner. "I realize your trigger finger is itching, but you must rein in your bloodlust for now." Dropkick grumbled and crossed his arms as Shatter turned back to the smaller bot. "Now, I ask again, where is Optimus Prime?" However, the small bot wouldn't give them that satisfaction. "My name is Windcharger, Lieutenant to the Autobot Resistance." Shatter glanced toward Dropkick and nodded, prompting the thug to reach over his shoulder and pull his rotor blades off his back. "My safe return to Gah." In mere seconds, the blades combined to form a sword, which Dropkick instantly stabbed into Windcharger's left pectoral. "Wrong answer," Shatter warned. "We know that he's searching for the ship that you launched from Cybertron. So if you tell us where it could be, then we'll let you live." "My name is Windcharger," Windcharger repeated. "Luton. But for his troubles, Dropkick wrenched his blade in Windcharger's chest, causing the smaller mech to convulse in pain. I was afraid of that." "Dropkick, let us, wait." Shatter's eyes widened as her hand went to her helm, her finger pressing a button directly under her antenna. There was an odd buzzing that she had picked up on her scanners, and she could tell that it was coming from one bot in particular. "What, you pickin' up something with that superheron of yours?" Dropkick asked. Shatter gave him a nod. One of the perks of having this antenna was that she could pick up signals from far greater distances than most other Cybertronians could. And now, it had given her something that she had been craving for nearly 300 stellar cycles. Indeed, and I believe that it is B127's signal. Windcharger's optics widened in a panic. Number. He weakly shouted. Can you trace it? Dropkick asked. I can. It appears to be coming from a small solar system. Shatter craned her head up to the stars. And it seems that it's originating from a planet that's a few orbital cycles from where we are currently. Dropkick couldn't help but roll his optics. Ah, great, it's gonna take forever to get there, then. He glanced down to Windcharger and jerked his head toward him. So, do we still need him? Shatter waved her arm toward him. Remove your blade for a moment. Dropkick did as he was told and took his blade out, allowing Windcharger to slump over. But that wouldn't be for long as Shatter took Windcharger by the head and smiled at him. If you won't tell us where Prime is, then perhaps your young friend will. Never. Windcharger spat. You're a brave warrior, Windcharger. You deserve a better death. Shatter smirked to Dropkick, which was all the signal he needed. Then again, Shatter let go of Windcharger's head as Dropkick used his sword to slice the bot in two, destroying him instantly. Shatter chuckled malevolently as she set her sights to the stars once more. Set course for, I wonder, what is the planet that B-127 is on? Who knows? Dropkick asked as he pounded his fist into his other metal palm. By the time we're through with it, it'll be nothing but cinders. And it's the end of part 1 of this new What If. I hope you guys like it. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment down below and subscribe to the channel.